There was a time when flooding in the Philippines made sense. A super typhoon would arrive, the rain would roar for days, rivers would swell, and the water would rise slowly like a warning you could see coming, giving people time to lift furniture, move cars, and brace for impact, because everyone understood that this was the price of living in the path of powerful storms. But something strange has been happening. Now it floods when the rain doesn't even feel extreme, when there is no named typhoon dominating the headlines, when people wake up to knee-deep water after what sounded like an ordinary night of rainfall, and the confusion is always the same. How did this happen so fast? You might think typhoons are the cause, but what if the real reason floods are getting worse isn't in the sky at all? By the end of this video, you will understand why blaming the weather has been the wrong explanation all along, and how invisible human decisions quietly turn normal rain into a disaster. Once you see what's really happening beneath the streets and cities, flooding will never look random again. If you live in the Philippines, you've probably asked that question yourself, or you've heard it shouted from a window, posted online in frustration, or whispered while watching water creep across the floor. And the most unsettling part is this: the storms haven't dramatically changed, but the floods have. That contradiction is where this story begins, and by the end of this video, you are going to see flooding not as a natural disaster, but as something far more uncomfortable, because once you understand the real reason this keeps getting worse, it becomes impossible to unsee it. For decades, we were taught a simple explanation: the Philippines floods because it gets hit by typhoons. It sounds logical, clean, and reassuring. Because if nature is to blame, then no one has to answer for anything, and every flood becomes an unavoidable tragedy instead of a preventable failure. But here's the problem with that story. If typhoons were the main cause, flooding should only spike during the strongest storms. And yet flooding is now happening during monsoon rains, afternoon downpours, weak weather systems, and sometimes even without any dramatic warning at all. So the question is not why typhoons cause floods. The real question is why floods are now happening, even when typhoons are not. And that question leads us somewhere uncomfortable. Because the answer is not in the sky, it is under our feet. Think about how rain used to behave. Rain would fall, soak into soil, travel slowly through forests, spread across wetlands, feed rivers gently, and eventually make its way to the sea in a process that took time, balance, and patience. Water had space to breathe. But over time, we replaced that system piece by piece, quietly, efficiently, and without ever stopping to imagine the consequences. We covered soil with concrete. We flattened wetlands into subdivisions. We straightened rivers, narrowed esteros, filled creeks, and called it development. And now, when rain falls, it has nowhere to go. This is the part most people never see. Flooding today is not caused by too much water. It is caused by little space. Cities like Metro Manila were never designed for the volume of water they now receive. Not because engineers were incompetent, but because the environment they were designed for no longer exists. When you replace absorbent land with roads, parking lots, malls, and housing, rain does not disappear. It accelerates, sliding across surfaces at terrifying speed and rushing toward drainage systems that were built for a different era, a different population, and a different climate. So even moderate rain now behaves like an emergency. And here is where the tension deepens, because while rain is falling faster, the land itself is sinking. Large parts of urban Philippines are slowly subsiding, pulled downward by decades of groundwater extraction, which means areas that used to sit safely above flood levels are now closer to sea level, closer to rivers, and closer to disaster. The ground is literally dropping while the water keeps rising. This is not dramatic metaphor, it is physics. And when land sinks, gravity stops helping water escape. Drainage systems that once worked suddenly feel useless. Pumps struggle to keep up, and floodwater lingers longer, soaking homes, businesses, and streets that were never meant to be underwater for hours or days at a time. But we still haven't reached the most invisible problem, rivers, or more accurately, what we've done to them. Rivers in the Philippines used to be wide, messy, and alive, overflowing into floodplains that acted like natural shock absorbers, spreading water out instead of letting it pile up in one place. But over time, those floodplains were occupied, those riverbanks were encroached upon, and those waterways were narrowed, straightened, and constrained to make room for human activity. The rivers didn't get smaller, we forced them into smaller spaces. So now when heavy rain arrives, rivers do not slowly rise. They snap, spill, and surge. The water goes wherever it can, which increasingly means homes, streets, and communities built where water used to be allowed to roam freely. This is why flooding feels more violent now. It is not because rain is angrier. It is because the system is tighter, more rigid, and far less forgiving. And there is another layer to this that most people never connect: deforestation. When forests disappear from watersheds, rain loses its brakes. Trees slow water down. Their roots hold soil in place, and without those roots, hills turn into slides, sending mud, debris, and sediment into rivers that slowly clog from the inside. Over time, rivers become shallower. Shallower rivers hold less water, and rivers that hold less water overflow faster. This process does not make headlines. It does not happen overnight. But year after year, it quietly reduces the margin between normal rain and catastrophic flooding. So when people ask why floods seem to arrive out of nowhere, the truth is that they have been building for decades, layer by layer, decision by decision, permit by permit. But the most painful part of this story is not environmental, it is human. Because the people most exposed to flooding are often those with the fewest choices, living along waterways not because they want to, but because cities failed to provide safe, affordable alternatives. Informal settlements did not cause flooding. They were pushed into its path. And when floods come, they are blamed, relocated, forgotten, and then replaced by new communities facing the same impossible risks. It is a cycle that feels natural only because it is repeated so often. And yet, despite all of this, the public narrative remains stubbornly simple, as if weather alone could explain why flooding now happens faster, deeper, and more often than ever before. This is where we arrive at the heart of the story, the climax most people resist. Flooding in the Philippines is not primarily a natural disaster. It is a design outcome. It is the logical result of how land was used, how cities were planned, how water was managed, and how short-term gains were prioritized over long-term resilience. Typhoons did not suddenly become the enemy. They just revealed the weakness that was already there. Once you see this, everything changes. You stop asking why it always floods here, and you start asking who decided this should be built here in the first place. You realize that floods are not surprises. They are consequences. And that realization is heavy, because it means the solution is not as simple as praying for weaker storms or better weather forecasts. It means confronting uncomfortable truths about governance, planning, accountability, and how development was defined for decades without fully understanding the cost. But clarity does not have to feel hopeless, because understanding the real cause of flooding gives power back to people, not by offering quick fixes, but by shifting the conversation away from helplessness and toward responsibility. When floods are framed as unavoidable acts of nature, nothing ever changes. When they are understood as systemic failures, change becomes possible, even if it is slow, difficult, and deeply political. The rain will keep coming. The Philippines will always live with water. But water itself is not the enemy. The enemy is pretending that flooding is inevitable, when in reality, it is engineered by choices we can see, question, and eventually change. And maybe the most important shift is this: floods are not just emergencies, they are messages. They tell us where the land can no longer cope, where systems are breaking, and where ignoring the environment has finally caught up with us. If we listen, really listen, flooding stops being a mystery. It becomes a mirror. And what it reflects is not the sky above us, but the ground beneath our feet, and the decisions written into it, long before the rain ever fell. That is why flooding is getting worse in the Philippines, even without stronger typhoons. Not because nature changed overnight, but because we did, slowly, quietly, and without realizing just how much water remembers every decision we make. And once you see that, you will never look at a flooded street the same way again. If this video changed how you see flooding, the next one might change how you see where you live. Some places in the Philippines are becoming quietly unsafe in ways most people do not notice until it is too late. In the next video, I break down the top 10 most unsafe places to live in the country in 2026, and I explain why the danger is not always where you expect it to be.